Imagine waking up in a world you thought was normal just a few weeks ago. The streets you once walked to school or work are now blocked with sandbags. The city you've known your whole life is divided by barricades. In the distance, you hear the rumble of gunfire. Somewhere close, a machine gun barks. From the balcony across the street hangs a different flag than the one you have displayed on your own home. Welcome to the reality of civil war. A civil war is not like a classic armed conflict between two states. It's a war that tears a single nation apart from the inside. Neighbors become enemies. Friends betray you to save their own lives. Families fall apart because each member believes in a different truth. The fight is for ideals, for power, for survival. And this is the world we are now entering. In this story, you are an ordinary person who, within a few days, becomes a soldier. First, we need to look at how civil wars really begin. Many people think it's a sudden explosion of violence, but in reality, it's the slow accumulation of frustration, hatred, and unresolved divisions within society. Tension grows for years, sometimes decades. People stop trusting institutions. Politicians abuse power, the media spreads propaganda, and economic inequality creates a deep divide between people. At some point, society can no longer bear the weight. Then comes the spark, perhaps a brutal police crackdown, disputed elections, or an assassination, and the avalanche begins. In such a moment, when reality starts to crumble, someone might put a weapon in your hands. It could be a neighbor with ties to a militia, or recruiters going door to door promising protection in exchange for loyalty. And you, or whether out of conviction, fear, or the simple need to survive, join them. You are no longer a civilian, you are a soldier. But being a soldier in a civil war is nothing like serving in a professional army, one with structure, training centers, technical support, medical care, steady supplies, and the backing of a state. In a civil war, everything is improvised, chaotic, sometimes literally cobbled together on the spot. Your unit is often just a group of people who barely know each other. Some are former soldiers, others are ordinary civilians who, just weeks ago, were sitting in offices, classrooms, or at home in front of the TV. Your weapons? Don't expect modern rifles with optics or night vision. If you're lucky, you're holding an old assault rifle from the 1980s with more jams than your kitchen knives have scratches. Sometimes you're given a weapon that doesn't even work properly, forcing you to fix it yourself or scavenge for parts wherever you can. If it didn't come from a supply depot, you probably took it from someone who fell in battle, maybe an enemy, maybe your own comrade. Uniforms? The word hardly has meaning here. Most fighters wear whatever they can find: camouflage pants, old jeans, jackets left over from civilian life. In some cases, the only identifying mark is a strip of colored tape on the arm or a scrap of cloth tied around a helmet. This leads to tragic mistakes. In the dim light or the chaos of battle, you often can't tell who is who. Friendly fire isn't rare, it's a painful, frequent reality. And training? If you're truly lucky, you'll get a few days of basic instruction: how to hold a weapon, how to take cover, how to move in pairs, how to stay out of sight. But if you're like most, you'll find yourself in combat before you've even learned to load a magazine safely. Your first firefight will be not just your baptism by fire, but also your only lesson in tactics, and often your last. At first, you're overwhelmed by chaos, shouting, gunfire, the unpredictable actions of others. It's nothing like the movies, where everyone knows their role. Here, people move without a plan, some run away, others fire blindly. If you survive the first few encounters, something inside you begins to awaken: instinct, a kind of animal alertness. Every sound, every shadow, every movement of a branch becomes a warning. You learn to read the environment, to hear the difference between Kalashnikov fire and a submachine gun, to sense when silence is suspicious. Your senses sharpen, but your body begins to deteriorate. Constant tension and fear eat away at you from the inside. In civil war, survival favors not the strongest, but the most adaptable. Survival is measured not by physical strength, but by how quickly you make decisions, how well you can hide your emotions, and how effectively you improvise. You must think several steps ahead. Every decision, whether to take this street or stay a few minutes longer in position, can mean the difference between life and death. Those who panic or freeze at the wrong moment rarely survive their first month. When you're not fighting, other challenges await. The daily struggle for food, water, and basic hygiene becomes a battle of its own. Most cities have long been without electricity. Power stations were destroyed in the first weeks. Flashlights, generators, and power banks become precious commodities. Sewage systems stop working. Garbage piles up, rats appear, infections spread, and an indescribable stench fills the air. Wells and water reservoirs are often contaminated or controlled by armed groups that use them as a tool of power. Clean water becomes a luxury traded like weapons. The food you once bought at the corner store turns into an unattainable goal. Canned goods, dried foods, anything that lasts without refrigeration, all of it is worth its weight in gold. Sometimes trade happens right in the street: 3 cigarettes for a can of meat, an old phone for a bag of pasta. People try to grow vegetables on balconies, search for edible roots and mushrooms, collect rainwater in plastic containers. And when options run out, some resort to things they could never have imagined in peacetime. Medicine is even scarcer than food. Antibiotics you once took for a simple tooth infection are now rare treasures. Injuries that would normally be treated easily can turn into deadly infections within days. A scratch from a rusty fence, a shard of glass in your foot, a small burn, in conditions without clean water, bandages, or disinfectants, all can become life-threatening. There are no sterile dressings in the field. Wounds are treated with torn pieces of t-shirt, cauterized with hot metal, or simply wrapped with whatever cloth is at hand to stop the bleeding. Pain is eased with alcohol or sheer willpower, and those unable to stand often remain where they fall, because there is no way to transport them. Your body changes. You lose weight, muscles waste away, your face turns pale. Not because you want to, but because you have no choice. Every day wears you down. Every minute under stress adds weeks to the strain on your mind. Many people break psychologically. Some start talking to themselves, others withdraw completely. And there are those who, in a sudden fit of desperation, simply run toward the bullets, not because they want to die, but because they can't go on. Then comes something you never truly grasp in advance. Something no theory, book, film, or psychological preparation can ready you for: seeing death up close. Not hearing about it, not seeing it on the news, but smelling the blood, the burned flesh, and the gunpowder. Hearing the screams, not anonymous, but specific. The voice of someone you know by name, someone you shared a piece of bread with that morning. Now they're lying on the ground, struggling to breathe, bubbling blood rising from a wound in their chest. This isn't heroism, it's reality, burrowing under your skin. Every day, you carry new memories, and none of them are beautiful. Often, you're forced to make decisions you would never even think about in normal life. Whether to shoot someone who's aiming at you, even if they hesitate. What if it's just a boy who's never pulled a trigger before? But what if you hesitate, and next time it's your blood on the ground? Civil war erases the line between right and wrong. There is no universal moral compass, no clear guide. Morality bends constantly under the pressure of circumstances. It reshapes itself according to what survival demands. One day you refuse to execute a prisoner. The next day you're forced to do it, because otherwise his people will kill you. And suddenly you realize that the line you thought you'd never cross lies far behind you. History offers plenty of chilling examples. The Spanish Civil War, in 1936 to 1939, was a conflict that split not only the country but families. It wasn't just a war between two sides, it was a network of simultaneous battles between fascists, republicans, anarchists, and communists. For different ideologies, for different visions of the future, for different reasons to take up arms. Caught between them were civilians, often forced to choose a side simply because their neighbors had chosen the opposite. Not out of belief in an idea, but because they wanted to stay alive. Propaganda knew no bounds. Each side painted the other as monsters. There were purges, executions, public humiliations. People were forced to betray friends to protect their own families. Then there was the war in the former Yugoslavia in the 1990s, when a state that had been held together for decades by the force of a regime suddenly collapsed. Everything that had worked before no longer applied. Neighbors who once celebrated holidays together, children who attended the same schools, people who worked side by side, all found themselves overnight on opposite sides of the barricades. Worst of all, they often had no choice. They were born Serb, Croat, or Bosniak, and suddenly that was their identity, their fate. Memories from that period speak of how easily someone could be labeled an enemy based on their surname alone. The war in Yugoslavia showed that a civil conflict is not just a military clash, but above all, the breakdown of society, the collapse of trust, friendship, and humanity. And then Syria, a conflict that began as a series of peaceful protests for freedom and reform, led by students, intellectuals, and ordinary citizens. The regime responded with violence. In an atmosphere of fear, blood, and frustration, society fractured into different groups: Islamists, Kurdish militias, regime forces, foreign interventions. The war splintered into dozens of factions, each with a different goal and different way of fighting. In the end, it became impossible to tell who was who. Civilians suffered between the grinding stones. They could trust no one. Every checkpoint could be either salvation or death. Every soldier could be a protector or an executioner. And what if you're captured? What if the war decides you will no longer be the one holding the gun, but the one staring down its barrel? This isn't just another chapter in your story. It's a different book entirely, written in another language, without rules or certainties. If you grew up believing that prisoners of war have rights, that there's such a thing as the Geneva Convention to protect those who fall into enemy hands, prepare for a harsh awakening. In civil war, rules often don't exist, and if they do, few follow them. Your captors might be armed men with no training, teenage boys barely able to hold a rifle. Or a militia formed only a month ago, with one goal: survive at any cost. As a prisoner, you have no guarantees. You can be interrogated even if you have nothing to say. You can be tortured because someone wants revenge. You can be forced to speak on camera, your face turned into a tool of propaganda. If you are truly unlucky, or it's simply a bad day, you might become a warning. Your life could end in a short video recorded on a mobile phone and shared across social media, to show everyone what happens to those who resist. This is the kind of reality no one tells children at bedtime. It's the raw truth, and only those who understand that, in captivity, you stop being a soldier and become a symbol, have a chance to survive. And like any symbol, you can be saved or destroyed. Yet even in the midst of this darkness, where humanity seems lost, there are exceptions, small flashes of something you no longer expect: kindness. Moments that happen away from cameras, politics, and the logic of war. When a soldier shares his last piece of bread with a hungry enemy. When a group of fighters carries an injured child out of a burning house, even though they could be shot for it. These moments remind you that, deep down, even in those who kill, there remains some trace of conscience, and that survival is not just about staying alive, but also about not letting yourself become an animal. To survive, it's not enough to be armed. You have to become both predator and prey. Every day is a test. You start noticing things you never paid attention to before. You learn to recognize different kinds of gunfire by sound alone. Your brain begins to register cadence, direction, distance. You hear a shot and instantly know: submachine gun, assault rifle, sniper. It's not a gift, it's a necessity. The way you perceive the world changes. Terrain is no longer just scenery, it's a living space full of dangers and opportunities. Every rock can be cover, every shadow a hiding place. In seconds, you learn where to take shelter. Your movement becomes quieter, your breathing slower. You move like an animal that knows every sound could bring death. Your body changes. In a few weeks, you lose weight because food is scarce. Fat goes first, then muscle if you can't get enough protein, but along with it, bad habits vanish. Your body reorients itself toward a single goal: survival. Your reflexes sharpen. You start reacting before you even realize it. Your body acts on its own, you don't think, you feel. Instinct, which you may never have discovered before, becomes your greatest weapon. Sleep itself becomes a battlefield. If you once fell asleep with your phone in hand, now you sleep with your weapon under your head, literally in a position where you can aim it in a second. Magazine always full, safety off, and even in your sleep your ears learn to react to sounds, a soft step, the snap of a twig. A child might turn over in bed. You reach for the trigger, and you never truly know who is on your side. War creates gray zones, disinformation, false flags, infiltration. You may trust people who betray you, or be saved by someone you thought was an enemy. After months of war, you might not even remember why you're fighting. Ideals turn into hollow words. You fight because you have to, because going back to civilian life is unimaginable. Maybe you no longer have a home to return to. The question of whether you could survive as a soldier in a civil war is not simple. It's not just about physical strength or courage. It's about the ability to adapt, to endure psychological pressure, to keep your sanity, and to find some meaning in chaos. Whoever you are, student, craftsman, teacher, manager, war will change you. It will make you do things you never thought yourself capable of. And yet, thousands of people around the world go through this hell every day. This isn't fiction, it's reality. And that's why it's important to ask this question. Not to prepare for war, but to understand how fragile peace is, and what is worth protecting while we still can.